Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 6th season, we are looking at the Avengers. I'm Andy Nelson from the TruStory FM Entertainment Podcast Network.
And I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here for Maria Hill's handbrake slide.
Very nice.
Today we're talking about Minute 10, which begins with a blocked tunnel and ends with an exploding base. Joining us on the show today is Justin Jaeger. Justin, hello.
JJ!
Hi. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
We're thrilled to be talking about this explosive minute here of the movie. Very early on, and we're already blowing things up.
Can't happen fast enough, I always say.
JJ, coming into this show, this season, welcome, first of all, and
thanks.
Talking about the Avengers, now that we're kind of hitting the end of phase 1, let's just talk a little bit about your history with the Avengers and this film. Where were you? Like, do you remember when this movie came out? Were you there opening day? Were you excited about this build-up that they had leading into this, movie with the whole team? How did this hit you?
That's such a good question. And I think that, had there not been, 20 million Marvel movies, it might be easy for me to place where I was at this time. But it all seems to be a little bit of a time warp. I know that for me, if I think about the progression of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that this movie felt like, oh, I knew they were doing these individual movies, but now they're going to bring it all together. And I know that happened a little bit before this movie came out. I know that the plans, and the purchase, the Disney sort of taking over Marvel and moving into this realm, I knew it was kind of moving this direction, but it kind of made it a reality of something that I wanted to happen when all the comic book movies started coming out, and the X-Men universe before we got into the MCU and that kind of stuff. This is, as a comic book collector as a kid, this is exactly what I had dreamed of. So I know I had a lot of anticipation for this kind of movie saying, oh, they're really going to do it. Or at, before we saw the execution of everything, they're really going to try it, because that's what I wanted. So I know that I felt that way. But what year did this come out?
2012.
Anyways, 2012. Tough year. I know I saw it right away, and I know it did fulfill my expectations. It was the kind of movie that I wanted it to be, and so I was really happy that it came together for all those reasons that I mentioned. And
have you found that as you revisit the films of the MCU, do you find that this one still holds up, or do you feel like it's not as good as it is compared to like later Avengers films?
Well, that, I think, is a very astute question, because I think that it did satisfy all those expectations then. But going back and looking at it, there are moments, there are minutes, there are Marvel movie minutes in the Avengers that I love.
Uh-huh.
But it really feels like they were exploring what to do with this collaboration or bringing all these things together here. And it really doesn't feel like the tightness or the specialness that I have in the later things. It doesn't hold up in the same way that it does in my heart, I guess, when I rewatch it.
Sure. Like, it holds up with nostalgia's weight upon it. But as a movie, it's a little loose.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I will say, I mean, one of my favorite scenes in the entire Marvel universe is the puny god scene later at the end. And I know you're going to get there eventually with this. And that holds up in my brain and in my heart and in everything. And my kids and I go back and we watch it on YouTube just to see that happen. But the whole thing as a finished piece is not as tight and as wonderful as some of the stuff that comes later in the MCU.
Sure. Well, and that's actually an interesting perspective to take, because I suppose there is that element of, once we've had this, like once this came out in 2012, then it was there, and that was kind of like it had set a new bar. And so for Kevin Feige and everyone that he brought on to kind of continue, they needed to kind of keep raising that bar. They didn't want to kind of fall below it. And so this was a great bar for them to set in 2012, knowing that their goal was always to achieve more beyond that. It's
I totally agree that this is the foundational piece. And what I look at it as now, going in back, is like, oh, it's kind of like Thor's eyebrows in the first Thor movie. Like, I didn't remember that was there, but it's so much better now.
So this movie is the Thor's eyebrows of the MCU.
Oh, yeah, that's canon. Wow.
That is so funny. It is there for sure.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, let's start digging into this minute a little bit. So we're coming into this right in the middle of this this pursuit in the tunnels. Well, the pursuit is largely over because, as we just saw, Loki blew up his own guy's car. This was the the agent that he had turned who was following him. He blew up his car. Now, he didn't kill him. We didn't talk about that in the last minute, but he blows out the passenger side of the car, and then the car crashes and flips. Theoretically, I suppose his agent is still following him, religiously, and then is going to die here shortly, unfortunately. But I think it's really funny. He shoots this guy, and now his car is flipped over and blocking all the pursuers. And so now they essentially have a way out, and you get this great shot of Loki looking very
smug,
pleased with himself. Very smug. JJ, you talked with us on the Thor when we did Thor a little bit, but where do you land with Loki and the way that he's portrayed here in this film?
I'm really happy that you asked that, because Loki ends up, and again, we're doing this in context of knowing where the universe goes. So
sure.
So Loki's character arc over the course of the entire MCU is one of my favorites, and honestly, where he ends up as a character is so special to me. So watching this minute in particular, where he has this, sinister, pleased with himself kind of thing, it's like, oh yeah, he was like the first big bad that they ever introduced in the Marvel things. And they retouch on that in later movies too, but it's really hard for me to gather that feeling, right? Of, in this movie, he is almost none but sinister throughout, right? When he's mind controlling repeated humans and all these things. And it's interesting for me to get back in that mode of, oh yeah, we're supposed to dislike him
right
now.
Yeah.
Because,
they've done a hell of a turn.
Hiddleston, and Hiddleston is such a likable actor too. It's just like, he's one of the characters that I'm most excited for the future of the MCU. So it's weird to see that and remember how it initially felt looking at him. I think he makes a great big bad though. I mean, he has range. He can be sinister and likable. I mean, it's pretty wonderful to see him on screen.
And this was the big year for Hiddleston, right? Like, I have to look now. I think this was the year. It was right the year before, the year of Thor. He also did Midnight in Paris, where he was F. Scott Fitzgerald. He was in The Deep Blue Sea. He was in War Horse. So, he had all of those hitting in the same period and then leading right into this. So it was a very, very busy time for him as an actor in a variety of roles. I mean, I think Loki is obviously his most devious of them. And then some fairly nice characters. But it's nice to see that he was, that people were discovering him all at the same time.
Have you guys seen the YouTube clips of him actually, because he was first going out for Thor?
No.
Yeah, so he went out for Thor first, and then they decided that he'd be Loki through the process. And I think it's so interesting to think of how different his career would be if they chose him for Thor. I think they chose completely well. Mm-hmm. I think they did the exact right thing in the way they cast that. And I think in the YouTube clip that I watched, like, Tom agreed, right? He said, you have to put Hemsworth as Thor. There's no competition there. But he's just so, you mentioned that being such a great year for him. This becomes a transformational year for him as an actor, because now he is not only this legendary serial character through the MCU, but all these other great films and things that he's doing. I think it's really wonderful for him.
It's actually fascinating. It works so much. I can't even imagine him thinking, I am right for Thor.
Well, every actor in their head goes, oh, they could totally make me Thor. Like, every
Andy,
actor.
I'm right for Thor. I mean, I could put Thor in my head. God.
Not me.
Yeah.
I want to be Thor.
Yeah, I want to be Thor.
But I don't see myself as Thor in any way.
Yeah.
Are you not the god of microphones?
Well, so Loki's obviously, he's very pleased with himself. He's blowing things up in the tunnel, and they're no longer being pursued. And, we get a few other shots of just destruction. The Tesseract energy, of course, is still bubbling up in the ceiling, doing whatever it's doing. We're still unsure as to what's really going on with this thing. You get a quick shot of Fury running out and all sorts of pipes falling out of the ceiling. It is a great little moment of devastation at this place. And then you get a shot that just cracks me up of Coulson and some men trying to carry some, like a dolly full of cases, like Pelican cases, down a set of stairs, and they all fall over and drop all the cases down the stairs. And it's a perfect example of just one of those shots where they're just like the cameraman's just wiggling the camera a little bit just to make it look like, things are happening.
Yeah.
And it cracks me up.
Well,
right.
I also think I think there's like you skip over the pipes falling, which I think is kind of an important production design choice because those pipes, it doesn't appear that they're connected to anything.
No, it doesn't.
I find that amusing. Like that is that like the storage center for loose pipes and ladders? Because there's nothing comes out of them. There's no additional smoke. I find that funny. And then when we get to Coulson and we have these SWAT team people who are trying to get the cases down these stairs, when there are clearly some administrative people right behind them who should be doing this job. SWAT team people should not be carrying boxes. That's what is good. They don't manage dollies. And so all of this is funny. And that's why, for me, Coulson saying, just stop. I'm tired of you all. Go get out. That's what I hear. I think he's really good.
Well, little did you know, those pipes and those boxes were the only thing holding that building together.
That was it.
They didn't really, that was a show and not a tell of like, when these things fall over, you need to go.
Right. Can I say the thing that I find so incredibly mesmerizing that I've probably watched this thing like dozens of times now? It's in the shot of the stairs when Coulson and all the people are falling. The light in the ceiling explodes, and it's got all the sparks shooting down and everything. But then it has this interesting ring of smoke that emanates from it and just crawls across the ceiling around it. And it's I don't know, like 10, 11 seconds into this minute. And I find it so weirdly peaceful to just watch this smoke circle just kind of expanding across the ceiling at its own pace. Like I'm
never going to unsee it. That's amazing.
I kind of love it.
It's a whole new ASMR for Andy.
It is.
Totally.
It really is.
Watch the smoke move across the screen. I like that kind of stuff. Like my first favorite movie ever was Backdraft, and I love the play with fire and that kind of stuff. So I totally recognize what you're talking about, but I did not see the smoke. So that's interesting. I'm going to go back and look for it now.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. So we're getting shots of everybody in the process of getting out. We cut back to Clint driving, and we see Selvig in the passenger seat. And then out of a side tunnel, because of course you need to have side tunnels in your escape tunnel, Maria Hill pops in and pulls in front of them. We had seen that she had gotten into a Jeep and was chasing, but we had never seen her since until this moment. And now we know why, because she was in this escape tunnel. She does a maneuver. She's in front of them. And then she spins her Jeep around. She does the little handbrake trick, spins her Jeep, and then drives backwards so that she and Clint can shoot at each other. How does this, as far as car stunt scenes go, how does it play for you?
So when I watched the minute the first time, when we first talked about scheduling this, I thought I was remembering that this was exciting and this was neat. And then I just came back from a work trip. I was in Salt Lake City, and on the way back, I watched the movie Atomic Blonde, and which I'm a major fan of that movie. I mean, I literally could just have it on the background and check it out. The car chase in Atomic Blonde is wild and exciting, and now watching this one back today, I was like, oh, they spin around, they do a couple things.
Right.
So in the context of your question, it is great and wonderful and neat that they should shoot it that way, but in comparison to some of the other great car chases, it's not as wonderful as I would hope.
It's pretty tame.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, tame is a good word for it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this is where I was landing with this, because I was thinking about, this is a big action film and it's going to have a number of set pieces over the course of the story. And my brain, anytime I'm thinking of that sort of film that starts with a pre-credits action sequence like we're watching here, my brain always goes to the James Bond franchise because they tend to have these great action sequences at the start, don't necessarily always tie into the story, but it's some action sequence, they're doing some crazy stunts, and then we get into the story, and then we have a number of set pieces throughout the film that kind of continually get better and better and better. When I see this as kind of our opening action sequence, and I know it's a fantasy sequence. There's a lot of other stuff that we're dealing with as far as the Tesseract and Loki jumping around and stuff. But I end up feeling like this is really tepid as far as what I'm getting out of an action sequence. Like they could have done something really interesting in this escape tunnel. I mean, we talked about tunnels yesterday, thinking about something like Sicario, which had a fantastic tunnel chase. And when I see this, I feel like, gosh, this is all they do with this. And I end up feeling a little disappointed that it's just this little Jeep maneuver that we get, which lasts less than this minute because she flips around, they shoot at each other a few times, and then I'm not even sure why she suddenly ends up switching back. I don't know. It seems like Clint is, I don't know if he's suddenly going faster and she can't keep up, and so she spins back around. I'm not exactly sure, but suddenly she just decides, I'm going to just spin back around and chase you again. And that's kind of it. It's really, I don't know, kind of flat. And so it left me a little disappointed as I've rewatched it a number of times.
Well, I like the idea, too, that you mentioned that maybe within the film itself, that the set pieces are going to grow in intensity. But I would, one of the minutes that we talked about on the last movie in Captain America was the escape in the big Hydra vehicle. And that even looked slicker, more interesting, more wild, a bigger moment. And that's just in the last movie. So you wonder if opening it up with this, if that maybe either it wasn't needed or it needed something more. It's one of those two things. And I'm not sure. I agree that the context of her switching back around seems lost. Like it's really difficult to understand why that's happening in terms of the chase.
Actually, I'm really glad you brought up Captain America because that's where my mind went to in terms of chases that in my head are amazing, but on screen are short and underwhelming. The one that Andy and I, we went back and forth on was the motorcycle chase through the woods in Captain America. I think it's great. And also, to his point, it's really short and kind of crazy. That was snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. They had something great and they did something less great with it. And I think that's where we are too. But with this movie and this particular scene, but to your point, Andy, this is, to me, about how efficiently and how quickly can we get to the implosion of the NASA Dark Energy Research Facility, because that's when the movie starts, right? We have to get to the tragedy quickly, and we've already wasted 2 minutes in the Loki hands the scepter pre-show thing. Who knows, that we've complained about before. And so this just feels like the focus is on the escape and not so much on, acrobatics of cars, because they could have done something had that been their intention, I think.
But, again, just in the same amount of time, they could have given us a Casino Royale level intro that was escaping this facility in a way that made it that much more gripping and entertaining. And I know this is a particular point in the film where there are no superheroes involved. This is just S.H.I.E.L.D. agents escaping. I mean, granted, we have Loki as our supervillain, but he's shooting some people with his staff, but largely he's just, I don't know. We were wondering again why he seems to be playing it so weak in the back of the vehicle. JJ, I'm not sure if that's something that you noticed, but when he gets into the back of the Jeep or the Hummer, he seems like worn out. Like, I'm not sure if the scepter is draining him or something, but it was strange. So he's kind of out. So it's not like Iron Man is involved in this flight. So it just ends up being spies basically trying to do an escape. And so maybe that's why they were trying to make it a more human level of escape as opposed to what we'd get later.
And what we've learned is humans are boring. I think that's what we've just decided.
Yeah, well,
move it along, humans.
Maybe
that's not why we're here.
That's right. Get out of the way. We've got some superheroes coming. Exactly.
Is this the only time, and you guys would know more than me? It probably isn't, but it feels like Hawkeye using a gun is something. That's not normal for the MCU.
No, and it's strange that he's using it. We've been talking about that since he pretty much came down from his hawk's nest, because he doesn't bring his quiver. We're not even sure if his quiver is sitting up there or somewhere. He wasn't the fact that Loki showed up wasn't planned, so it's not like he was walking around armed all the time with it. But it is weird that he walks around with his gun holstered all the time, but he doesn't have his arrows all the time. And so it is very strange. And we've been wondering about that quite a few days now, a few episodes, as to why is he just shooting with a gun and doesn't have his arrows with him.
Well, and then the other thing about Hawkeye, which we're going to end up talking about in a later minute, is that Hawkeye doesn't miss. Like, that's supposed to be the thing about Hawkeye. So the fact that this is happening in the way that it is potentially contrary to character or potentially a story point, which, we'll talk about in later minutes too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think there's potentially... It's tricky because there is something that we'll talk about in the future in a deleted scene where Fury says something, and so I am curious. Yeah, I'm curious about that. But to your point, though, he may not miss, but he should be hitting something more than nothing. I mean, he can be.
He's hitting a whole lot of nothing in that scene for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's very strange. We go from that. So now Hill spins around and now she's pursuing them as they race out of the tunnel. And Fury makes it to the chopper. I just really wanted Coulson to say, "Get to the chopper." Just really, really wanted that. But they're all safe. I don't know. This chopper pilot is amazing to just sit here as long as he or she is waiting for Fury, who I don't know if they know that Fury's actually coming, but they sit there waiting with the ground, like literally buckling underneath the helicopter. It's really funny that there's no sign. Like, I would like to have had some radio communication from Fury or something, like, "I'm on my way, hold the chopper," or something, so that this poor chopper pilot actually knows. I don't know. It's just one of those little things as you watch this too many times. Like, does this person know that Fury's actually running out the door at this point?
Right.
That's bold sacrifice, bold soldiering.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But Fury does get in, they fly away, and everybody ends up making it out as the whole ground in our facility buckles underneath the helicopter. You see it kind of bubbling up, and then kind of, I don't know, as you said yesterday, Pete, it's kind of the innie and the outie. You're getting a little bit, it's sucking itself down and it's pushing itself out.
What do you think of this explosion? Do you like it? I mean...
Yeah, I was going to say, in context of the way that the Tesseract energy finally blows, I think that it's really cool. I don't know. What would you describe the way that it's like all the energy? It's almost like going, what's the, I want to say supernova, but I don't think that's the right term. But there's when the star gets so big, it turns into a like the giant, and then it shrinks down into the little tiny thing and then sucks into a black hole or whatever. It's like that sort of cool effect where all of this energy sucks into this tiny little ball and goes completely quiet, which is really cool, and then blows up. I think that's cool. I really like the way it plays.
Yeah, we have this like concussive this concussive experience in the middle of it before it becomes combustion around the outside, and you see other things start to explode and cause fire as the building starts to cave in on itself. I think it's really cool. I like the way they put the shockwaves under the building coming out radially as far out as outside the circumference of the building itself. I think it's a great destruction to give us to some tragedy for them to escape from. I think that all works. And so we talk about the chase leading to this. This was rewarding enough for me. This experience was rewarding enough for me.
Well, and conceptually, it's like the Big Bang, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the idea. We don't know, but that's what we assume had happened with the Big Bang. So it's this idea artistically of like, if you bring it all together, it's got to explode. There's only one way to do it. I almost think that the crumbling or as everything gives way, that it really looks like volcanic, where it looks like the blue energy is kind of like this magma under the surface, and it's just everything's falling into it as like this volcanic sinkhole. And I think that
grand tectonic swallowing.
Right. That looks pretty cool for sure.
It is one of those moments that does make you wish that we didn't have to just talk about this minute, because we're like right at the cusp of all the stuff blowing up, and we're going to get a little bit more of it in the next minute. But it's very cool to see like what is happening to the ground. I love the shot, the aerial shot over as the helicopter flies away, and you see the facility as as everything kind of goes up and down, and it's very much that earthquake, ground shaking, all the fireballs everywhere. I mean, it's a great shot the way they constructed it. Part of me wishes it wasn't so dark because it's the middle of the night, so it's like
very dark.
It's a little hard to see, but it's probably easier to do the effects that way.
Well, and one of the other really satisfying, I think, anxiety-inducing bits of running from this kind of a thing is watching the trucks as the concussion ripples toward them, behind them, like they're trying to outrun the wave of ground. And you see right at the end of this minute as Coulson is in the truck and he's kind of bouncing around. I find that fantastic. Like just being able to time that effect so they put it so that you can really feel like they're actually outrunning something that could swallow them. It could fall back into. That is a great anxiety falling off of edges of roads, cliffs, whatever. I don't love driving near sharp drops, and this captures that. So, bully for Coulson for getting away. He had a good driver. As far as we know, we don't even know if he got away.
That's right. Not in this minute.
Well, that's right. We'll have to wait. We'll have to wait. I feel like it has become like a very effective cinematic tool that you see. I mean, it's the same thing that you see. My brain just goes back to Star Wars when the Death Star blows up, and it's like, did the Millennium Falcon, did they all make it out of the explosion? And then they pop out of the explosion, they're on the fringes of it and they burst out. And
that's exactly it.
Yeah, it's always a thrill to kind of see that sort of thing. And obviously filmmakers, when you have, it gives more energy to your project. I mean, if they got away 5 minutes ahead of the explosion, it takes a little bit of the energy and the excitement out of the film. So having it like right on the lip of it as it's going down, and that's the way to do it. And it makes for a fun time.
Just like they did in Tremors. I know you love Tremors real
just
bad.
Like hey, Tremors is a great film. I can't speak for the sequels, but the first film's fantastic.
Totally.
Well, all right. So the ground is buckling and everything's falling apart. That's pretty much where we end things here. Any last thoughts from either of you about anything going on in this minute?
Just, I wonder who makes it out alive.
Yeah, I know. We're not going to know. We don't know the scope of this explosion. It could be.
Nope.
They all might get sucked in. This might be the end of the of S.H.I.E.L.D., and this is why the Avengers have to come and avenge S.H.I.E.L.D., Pete.
That's right. It's very meta. They're going to write a comic about it.
Always seems like the weirdest name for a supergroup to me.
The Avengers?
The Avengers. It's almost like, we got to let something... what do they mention it in? Is that the Infinity War where it's like, we're not the Preventers?
Exactly. We're not the weird... We're the weird two laters.
Yeah. We're like, oops, we should have done something about that.
We didn't stop anything.
Here we are now.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
JJ, remind me, did you read the Avengers comics?
Yeah, I had a subscription for a while, but the years that I had it were in the mid 80s, early to mid 80s, and really the interesting stuff that happened in it is sort of far removed from anything they've used in the movies. A lot of it is being hinted at now, moving into the new phases of the MCU, stuff with like using Hercules and the sort of the more sort of demigod type things later on in the story, and a lot of mind control is very prevalent in the stuff that's happening there. But really in the Greek god stuff, that's when I had the subscription. So the MCU and the way that they've introduced the Avengers was really sort of a, I don't want to say a purist, but they really tried to start from the beginning with the characters that were at the original parts of the IP. For the most part, exactly not how they were in the story, but using those characters to begin. And so I'm really interested to see where it goes, especially now that we start seeing these other characters being introduced in cutscenes and stuff like this, because that's the Avengers that I know, the later Avengers. The Captain Marvel that's going to be introduced in the Marvels, that was the Captain Marvel that I grew up with, which is the Monica Rambeau Captain Marvel. So you've got all these different things, and I think I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with it next, because I just don't really have any idea. I'm not spoiled for what the next phases are going to be like. I'm excited that this is the way they started, but I'm really excited to see what they do next.
If you could pick your Avengers team, the cinematic Avengers team, who would you use to build it?
Gosh, that is a great question. Well, and now you say that now we're just talking characters, right?
Yeah,
but and they've introduced this character at the end of the Eternals. So Black Knight.
You're the second person to bring him up, yeah.
The lore around Black Knight, and I'm very excited to see what they do with that character, because the way that they're introducing him and the other character, because they have blades surrounding him, right? So they have that's like late in the Black Knight IP in the book universe. So the Black Knight that I know is earlier, but he led the Avengers for the ones that I was in. So it was like Black Knight and Hercules and She-Hulk and all these people, all the people that are just kind of starting to get their legs now. So I would start with it around Black Knight and around the lore that he has, because I feel that he's such a layered character and that there's so much interesting about what can happen with him. That's where I would begin, and then kind of do the stuff around them. So many people, like my oldest son's favorite character is Iron Man, and I'm like, and I love what they did with him on screen, but in the books he was always just kind of like this guy. Like I almost think that we got the West Coast Avengers, right, in what we have, because we have Hawkeye, we have Scarlet Witch, we have Iron Man. Those guys were all out on the West Coast,
right?
Like, I want these other Avengers. So I think that's a really good question, and Black Knight is where I would start.
Okay,
that's fascinating. Exciting. Black Knight represents a complete void in my comic knowledge. I think I remember calling you after I saw that teaser at Eternals. I was like, what is going on? It just means nothing to me. So I'm like you, for different reasons, very curious what is going on, because my least favorite parts of Thor Love and Thunder were involving the gods and Zeus and all of that stuff. It was just I really didn't like the handling of that. And so introducing Hercules and all these other characters, I just don't. It's a wash for me. I don't understand what they're doing.
Yeah. So. Well, and Feige is going to need a lot of. Gosh, the word that was coming up in my head was foresight. It's not about foresight. It's just depth, because all of these characters are not as simple as the characters that you see in the original Avengers movie here. These ones that we started with are kind of, and I don't mean base as a negative, they're just very standard. You can get where they are. You can understand them quickly on screen. These other characters, just like you're talking about, Pete, like understanding the levels of Black Knight and understanding this, there's much more to be told. And we see that in the She-Hulk series, right? There's such a intricate story that needs to be presented for us to understand these later character motivations from these earlier ones. So I think the opportunity is great, but it's also a big challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, just look at what for me, Gore the God Butcher, I think, was one that better in the comic. but
I'm sure,
but it feels to me like the depth, the range that is possible in that character. We're approaching what could make a really, really interesting film around some of these ideas of loss and parenting and what it means to grieve and guilt and all of that. So,
and all he got, what did he get? 8 minutes of screen time, and he was the film's main villain.
Yeah, and his main scream was cut. Right,
Yeah. Frustrating.
We've got a long time before we get to that one.
Yeah, so. Thank God. Yeah, I'm gonna have to simmer down.
Yes, indeed. Well, JJ, it has been a thrill. So thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Remind everybody, you're part of the TruStory FM Entertainment Podcast Network. What are some of the shows that you've been a part of over there?
Well, traditionally, I've been a big part of the film board, and we have ideas, and we have some interesting things on the horizon for that potentially coming back. We've also done Trailer Rewind, which is taking a bit of a hiatus right now. But those shows in the sort of the old cache of what we have, there's a lot of interesting films there that you may not know or may not have access to that are streaming, that are fun to check out. So take a look at those shows and look for new things from us on the horizon with the film board and others.
Fantastic. All right. Well, that's it for today. We'll be back next week to talk minute 11. So, Pete, thanks as always.
Once more into the ripple, my friend. Once more into the ripple.
Love it.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of TruStory FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Message to the World by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at TruStory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.